So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, we all want to make solar and battery systems more affordable. And on the surface, the problem is the equipment is expensive. Solar panels, batteries, racking, tariffs. The reality is the equipment costs are about half of the total cost of the system. The rest is for labor, sales, marketing, engineering, permitting, insurance, overhead, all kinds of other things that surprise you. And it's kind of bizarre. At every solar company that I've been at, my company as others, on a staffing basis, about half of the company is doing the work on the roof, in the field, hooking up batteries, things like that. The other half is administration, sales, marketing, accounting, engineering, lots of overhead. And I went to Germany in 2007 with my good friend Jeff Brown to figure out why our costs were $7 a watt. In Germany, it was half that, $3.50 a watt. Couldn't understand why they were cheaper. And I spent a full week until finally I asked somebody about the paperwork. And they said, paperwork? What is paperwork? They had no paperwork, no engineering, no permit, no inspection, no interconnection. One-page financing with the KfW bank and one-page invoice. That was it. And they just you could call a solar company on Monday. They would be installing on Tuesday. Our costs in the U.S. are still, that was 15 years ago, still double those of the rest of the world. So a simple installation here in California now is about $4 a watt and sometimes more. Most of the rest of the world costs are less than $2 a watt. And the biggest difference is that the U.S. has very complicated permitting, interconnection, installation requirements, and a lot of overhead. The staffing costs are also very high to retain qualified, indeed outstanding people. So, I've been thinking about this, but my friend Andrew Birch, a.k.a. Birchy, knows more about these costs and the solutions than anyone else in the world. Birchy was the co-founder and CEO of Sungevity, the first large-scale installer using software-based sales model. That means that he didn't have to send people up onto the roof. He could have his people working in an office selling solar anywhere around the world, whereas I was in San Jose with sales guys on ladders with graph paper. Birchy was way ahead of the times. Then after Sungevity, he founded and co-chaired something called SolarAPP, which streamlines solar permitting. And he's also the co-founder and CEO of OpenSolar, which streamlines solar designs and business processes. So welcome to the show, Birchy.
Thanks, Barry. Nice to see you again and connect again here.
Yeah. I mean, it's just tremendous getting back in touch, and you're operating a global company. But I just kind of wanted to get an idea from you. How is solar doing and storage growing? Is it really on the timeline and the growth pace that we expected?
Yeah, well, starting off at the kind of highest level, yes, it is. The mega trend is incredibly positive. So I think people like you and I and people in our industry, we always have some challenge that we're fighting and something we're trying to fix. But if you step back for a minute and do some of the maths, which I've done recently, you can see that we've grown. The analysis we did showed that we've grown by 34% per annum since the year 2000 as an industry. And costs have reduced by 15% per annum. So you've got this incredible, very consistent trend that everyone keeps calling an end to, but keeps continuing through all these challenges globally. And so the sort of fun place to start might be just to share the output of this model we call the S-curve. And maybe you can post the link to it in the show. But you can see from that if we carry on growing at 25%, because we're now 600 gigawatts, the compounding effect starts to have really big absolute numbers. And what that means is in just 10 years of 25% growth, we would hit 50%, 50, of all the world's energy by 2035. So we're part of something that is growing incredibly well and is going to have a monumental impact on the world. And that, I think, motivates us all, does it not?
Yeah. No, so what's the nucleus? Why is it growing so fast? What's the factor that's allowing us to reduce cost and penetrate so fast?
So fundamentally, it's the learning curve. The more you manufacture of anything, the lower the cost. So it's not rocket science, but what analysts tend to assume is that something's going to stop and slow down in the future. And that's where they've been wrong. So the manufacturing capacity, mostly in China, but all over the world, is growing, and those costs are reduced, which basically opens up more of the market. So we're now almost all of new electricity generation, power capacity is coming our way. And now you've got huge increases in electricity demand and the electrification of everything and AI centers. It's just this kind of constant demand where we are now the lowest cost solution. So
Yeah.
it'll keep happening.
Yeah, I mean, basically, that solar cell that cost $1,000 a watt that we sent into space in 1960 now costs like or 10 cents a watt, and it's still coming
Yeah.
down. And then the same thing is going to happen with batteries.
Yeah, 100%. Same learning curve, same economic drivers.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk a little bit about the technologies that you've developed and the procedures you've developed to really reduce the costs for solar all around the world.
Yeah, so I think you kind of nailed it with the intro. Like you've got the fundamentals, which are this is now the lowest cost solution. But in any one country, you've got these market barriers that effectively kind of disguise and hide those prices from showing up in the consumer's pockets. So if you take the United States, where a quarter of my life has been on this topic, and as you said, the permitting is the root cause of the biggest problem we have. We've got at OpenSolar about a third of the US contractors designing and selling on our platforms. We've got a really good read on pricing. And the average price right now that we're seeing is $3.40 a watt. We've got users in 150 countries, and that is the highest number anywhere. Australia's at $1 a watt, Germany's in the kind of $1.50, Europe's in that sort of range. Asia, you're down at 70, 80 cents a watt. So why is it that American consumers are paying so much more for solar? And you have experience in this, I know, Barry, and the reality is that there's just people who need to do work to get a system that's sold onto a customer's roof. That these are people that don't exist in the P&Ls of any other country around the world. And that's the thing that I hope that your listeners can just take a tiny minute to stop and pause. Because when I was in California, across the water from you, working away on this stuff at Sungevity, it's really easy just to assume that the American situation is the norm. But if you just step a little bit back, you see that every other country in the world, the process is you sell the system and next day or next week, you go and install it. Like there is no customer visits, there's no AHJ truck rolls, there's no design and engineering department, there's no back and forward with the AHJ. Like all of that goes away and that reduces your CAC. So there's often a misconception that US has a CAC problem. I mean, it does have higher CAC, but it's a root cause of the fact that the systems cost $20,000+, whereas in everywhere else in the world, you can, sell it for 5, 6, 7, 8 grand, chuck it on a credit card and you're done. So they're easier to sell. And you don't have a cancellation problem because, it's installed before you can cancel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it all sort of drives this CAC reduction, which increases your velocity. It all drives further cost reduction. And you have this learning curve within the soft costs, just as we do within the hard costs. And that leads to these very low prices everywhere else in the world if we can solve permitting in the States.
Well, we're making progress on it. We're happily using SolarAPP. My head of operations, she's like, I wish every single jurisdiction used SolarAPP. It just cuts our costs so much. So that's really terrific.
Amazing.
How can solar contractors simplify their business? You mentioned that because you're very active with OpenSolar.
Yeah, so there's a number of things that I think you have to do to digitize the processes that cost you time and money. And that's the thing we got to get right, because just kind of the benefit of distributed energy sales is that we're tapping into retail energy prices. So as long as we can be super efficient, we can create energy savings for the end customer far better than a utility scale solar system can. But it's hard, right? We've all done this. It's hard selling, scaling these businesses. So you have to digitize all your processes. So the two things that I've been working on for the last 8 years, and then the 10 years before that at Sungevity, are really around digitizing those things. And the two big ones are with OpenSolar, we've digitized the entire sales journey and project management. We've just launched payments so you can collect the cash in the proposal. You can automate your invoicing and chasing customers' payments up for M1, 2, 3, 4 cash payments. We've integrated the finance so it's all in the same place. And we're just all about trying to create this kind of platform where contractor selling in their own brand can do that really, really efficiently so they can grow really well and at low cost. And then the second project, which is a nonprofit that, as you said, I started, it was now 8 years ago. We got everyone in a room in San Francisco and said, Sungevity's gone bust. Most of the top 10 companies in the market have gone bust. We have to solve this problem. And over the last 8 years, it's taken way more time than anyone would like. But we now have SolarAPP as a standalone nonprofit, and great to hear that your company's benefiting from it. We've got lots of jurisdictions now using it. We're rolling out legislation pushes in 10 states around the US, and the goal of SolarAPP is to get to over half the US by 2030 with automated permitting. And it basically says like I can design a system on OpenSolar or any other platform, and I can click a button, migrate that information to SolarAPP, get an automated permit if it's done to code, and go and install that thing the next day or the next week, whenever the customer's ready.
Yeah, I distinctly remember that meeting. I think it was at Sunrun, sponsored with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and we kind of were all together there. And it was, you just did a terrific job of convincing the whole room that this is the way to go. And it got traction and it's working.
It's great. And yeah, and hats off to you and Lynn Birch, who's leading Sunrun at the time, and Billy Parrish at Mosaic, and all the people who got involved in that. I will say that it has been harder because we haven't had really good representation from our solar association. Like the states have been great. Bernadette, who recently left CalSA, huge hats off to Bernadette for all the amazing work she and her organization have done. But at the national level, SEIA, to me, still the data is very clear that they support and invest more in utility scale support and lobbying than they do on the things that we need in distributed, because that's where most of the solar and the money is in America. So like if we had more resources going into solving permitting, which is the root cause problem of our industry, then I think we could have got a lot faster. But anyway, we've rallied, we've had great support from a consortium of business leaders. I've put money in, OpenSolar's chipped in, and we have now got, a great organization with a solution that we just need rolled out everywhere as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And, it's interesting how, I was a board member and very active at SEIA for many, many years. And essentially there's a board of directors there. And as you pointed out, most of the money is in utility scale solar. That's where the module manufacturers are making their money. And as the board composition changed, their emphasis on utility scale became almost 100%. And, the residential, they acknowledge it, but they're not nearly as helpful as all the state organizations. But that's, it is what it is, and we're doing what we need to do. All right. When we're talking about cost per watt for rooftop solar, one of the things, and I've been participating in studies at Lawrence Berkeley Labs with Galen and kind of doing the cost stack forever and ever. And one of the things that jumps out at me is we sometimes forget that solar installers, they need to make a profit. They need to be sustainable. It's not a charity business. They can't be entirely altruistic. And what happens when they kind of get crushed down with prices so low, they kind of can't survive the downturns in the solar coaster. And, there's been a bunch of bankruptcies over the last 3 or 4 years, and every solar company that went out of business is because they weren't profitable and they didn't save enough money. How could SolarAPP and OpenSolar help these solar companies maintain their profitability? And I'm not talking about, huge gross margins. We're just talking about, 5 or 10% after tax. But how can they use OpenSolar and SolarAPP to be more profitable?
Yeah, so fundamentally, you can sell a system. If we solved the soft costs, you could sell a system in the United States at $1.50 to $2 a watt. And so that's taken the cost out of the system. Within that, there's plenty of room for 5 to 10% margin. I think customers, in my experience of many, like 2 decades of this, customers value really quality service and quality maintenance and being there for that customer over the life of the asset. And so that lends itself to local businesses, smaller regional businesses that manage customer relationships well. And that turned out to be how the market has been dominated by those businesses really in every country around the world. It's a fragmented, small, medium enterprise-led energy revolution, which is kind of cool because it's the little guys are winning. So within that, you've got plenty of margin. OpenSolar takes out a world of cost in sales and marketing, increases accuracy, reduces redesigns, brings in all the financing and payments tools and all this sort of paperwork and efficiencies that you need to just remove costs so you can eke out that margin. And then also with cash flow, this new payments product, it lets you collect cash faster and improves your collection rates, which is just vital to a small business. So that's a really important thing. And then if you're in an AHJ that has SolarAPP today, then I implore you, encourage you, integrate with them, use it. It's the fastest, easier way to get a permit, and that can flow straight through the margin.
Oh yeah, that absolutely works for us. And it's interesting observation. I think both you and I started in this path, and I was at Akina Solar running operation nationally, and you were doing the same thing with Sungevity. Afterwards, Sunrun and Solar City started. We tried to make it national, big company. And it's almost impossible. And, it's easy to look at this in retrospect and say, gee, that's the way HVAC is. That's the way plumbers work. That's the way electricians work. If you're working on a house, it's not a national company with which you would contract. You're going to hire the company that's got the best local reputation with a fair price. And it's inherently local. And so when I sold Akina Solar / Westinghouse Solar and started up in Cinnamon Energy Systems, we were like, we're just going to stay local. No aspirations to go national. Maybe we'll partner with other companies, but it really is local. And it's the service and maintenance that customers want, especially with batteries. That was the big epiphany for me. Solar, put it on the roof, it works. The only things that would break would be the monitoring. But now the batteries require care and feeding and configuration and changing things every season. So the companies that provide that level of service are the ones that are going to get the best reputation and the lowest customer acquisition cost. That's what CAC stands for, customer acquisition costs. It's one of our industry TLAs. So what do you think about Jigar Shah's recent comments that the solar industry needs to solve a problem for utilities and the solar industry is basically broken?
So the thing I agree with the direction of Jigar's kind of narrative is around the need for the battery to do the job at the aggregate level, at the system level. And what I recently wrote a paper on, in fact, with a professor here in England, I've called it the electric protocol. And that is where we need a market where we have the right signals so that when you put that battery in as a customer, you may have some additional expenses of maintaining it that your contract supporter will help you with, but you also need a revenue stream from that. And when you put a bunch of batteries in behind a substation that needs upgraded or has peak load issues, like being able to switch that on as a VPP, like to avoid that, millions of dollars of upgrade costs, that you deserve to participate in that with revenue. So like that macro view, I fundamentally agree with. The problem with Jigar's commentary is that, the problem with Jigar generally is he's never been a solar installer. Like he speaks with conviction about something he frankly doesn't know anything about. And, again, I applaud his environmentalism and his direction that he wants to take the US. But, what he needs to realize is that contractors can't solve these problems. Like we need policy to solve permitting. We need policy to monetize batteries. So like it does lie with government. And I think, unfortunately, in the 4 years of office, we didn't get any of the solutions under democratic leadership that our industry needed. So that's what really pains me. And I've had a couple of very heated arguments with Jigar about this, trying to persuade him to care and understand and execute these solutions. But there's a mindset there that this is not something that's a government problem, it's a contractor problem.
Yeah, I know Jigar pretty well, going back to his days on the Calcea board. He understands this. He's setting a goal out there, and maybe also setting a goal that's impossible to achieve, which I know it's impossible to achieve as a fact, as a 25-year contractor. But stretch goals are good. And in the meantime, if the residential industry is not hitting his stretch goal, which is completely ridiculous, then utility scale solar looks better and it's easier to scale that. The problem is that when you look at the cost for transmission and distribution of utility scale solar, it ends up being more expensive and slower to deploy than lots and lots of rooftop solar, including commercial buildings, schools, things like that, which have been kind of quashed here in California. So I'll be having a conversation with Jigar sometime coming up too, but he did as much as humanly possible in the 4 years he was with the Biden organization. And, it's just these local little issues that I think we're going to be so much more successful attacking with SolarAPP and OpenSolar than kind of federally changing the way cities and towns operate.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I mean, just to be a bit controversial though, like when you have 4 years in office and you know that there is a permitting problem that doubles the cost of solar in your country, you could absolutely allocate $5 to $10 million to SolarAPP to get that technology rolled out everywhere. And if you choose not to, then that's with you. So,
yep, yeah, I totally agree. It's so hard to raise money. It's impossible to raise money in this environment right now. But with Biden, the money was there, and we did scrounge up money within CalSA and other organizations. It helped, and we're getting some traction. But what I think it would be helpful. We talked about customer acquisition costs, and I talked about this cost stack for rooftop solar. Do you have a breakdown that we can talk about? And as we're discussing this, I can show it on screen when we update the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I've done analysis that obviously that's been plugged into all the SolarAPP work that we've done. And we've looked at Australia versus the US, and we've looked at the P&Ls of various businesses, including some of my old businesses and some OpenSolar users that have participated in this. And so you can see that, Australia is a little over $1 a watt, and the US this is slightly older data, but 320, we're at 340 today. And if you look at it, basically 2/3 of the challenge, the cost delta of $2.16 comes from permitting as the root cause. So it's due to the work you have to do to get from a sale to an installed system generating electricity, from which you then get your happy customer and referrals and everything else. The 20% of it comes down to code issues. So these are things like, requirements for remote disconnect, hard conduits and various other kind of installation requirements that are just different and easier overseas. And then about 14%, this is, about a year ago, came from the tariff. That number is probably a little higher still today with the further increases in tariffs. So 2/3 of the problem is permitting. And what SolarAPP does is it basically, automates and digitizes that process. So if used correctly in an AHJ that has approved the use of SolarAPP, then, you can sell it. And if it's designed to code, you can click a button and generate a permit, and you should be able to install that system straight away. So you lose all the cancellations, you lose all that volume of work. I mean, Barry, I had a funny story. Like at Sungevity, we'd have European friends come to us for a tour of the office, and we'd complete the tour of this building with all the sales team, and they go, right, because they're Europeans, they're like, let's go and have lunch. And we'd be like, no, we haven't finished the tour. You've got another, you've got another building to go through. And it was the entire team that was actually bigger than the sales team, like you say, who are doing all this other work that you need to do. So that all goes away, and that's what makes that profitability and that scalability possible.
Yep. So one of the things that I've observed over the past almost 25 years of doing installations is the faster you can install a project, the less it costs and the more profit you make. And the projects that kind of drag on because there's a question at AHJ about a permit, or a piece of equipment's no longer available because it took you 3 months to get the permit, the longer it takes, it just raises the cost tremendously. And even sometimes people leave and they remember, the guy that did this permit on this system is now gone. The new person has to relearn it. How will SolarAPP and OpenSolar improve the velocity of these projects?
So the first thing is accurate designs up front. So 3D tools with AI designs and just incredible accuracy. That means the rework, the number of jobs that need to be redesigned, reworked, recontracted, all of that, which I totally agree costs a ton of money and time. That is all absolutely minimized. Then you've got just the speed of all the data being in the same place. So in your OpenSolar account, you've got the sales process, you've got the design process, project management, financing, payments, all in the same place. So that kind of brings it all together. All the team can get it. It's all cloud-based. So the team can dial in and see that data from wherever they are in the field. And that just saves a lot of time and money. And then with the SolarAPP integration, which we just launched, so you can actually now connect it OpenSolar directly to SolarAPP. Again, you sell the system, you should be able to design that, sell it, and then get the permit instantaneously. So that's the speed and money kind of answer in our opinion.
How could my companies here in the U.S., the long tail of solar installers, how can we get more cities and towns to use SolarAPP?
So that's a great question. I think it would be one to, if you can, Barry, put in the links to the show. So visit SolarAPP website, and they will be able to show you what AHJs have it and whether you're already enabled. And they've also got instructions there as what to do to help them help you get the AHJ to sign up. So that if you're not in a jurisdiction today, the key thing is getting your AHJ to sign up. There's a second organization, permitpower.org, which has been set up as the advocacy arm of SolarAPP. And they are pushing for legislation to get this, just as we have now in California, partially implemented, unfortunately, but doing really, really well. As you said, that your business is enjoying. That if we can get that legislation in multiple other states, then that is probably the fastest route to getting these policies put in place, unless we get a Hail Mary in from federal government. And I did have a moment where I thought when Musk was put in as the Doge, that maybe he might care enough to implement automated permitting at federal level. Just as, if you remember in that meeting 8 years ago, I highlighted that in 1996 we had the Telecommunications Act that made satellite dishes, automated permit where they used to be local because it was in the national interest. So there is an argument. The federal government, if you're listening, Elon, I don't know if Elon listens to your show, but with a stroke of a pen, you could halve the cost of solar in America in every state.
Now, I tried really hard at SIA to get that through, and using the exact example of the satellite dish. It's a 3 square foot dish, and you can put it anywhere by federal law. There's no restrictions on where you can locate it automatically. And 2/3 of the SIA board at the time just wasn't really interested in pursuing that, which is understandable. Yeah. Now, we can cross our fingers and hope that Elon will kind of come back to our team, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I think that's Permit Power. So for everyone listening, permitpower.org is a nonprofit that you should be donating to with some of your profits in your business to help us get legislation that helps you and the industry get to the point that we can thrive. And Barry, I'll just say another big thing in solving this problem that I've seen in all the other countries we operate in OpenSolar, that just how nice it is to be able to invest in your business without this overhang of net metering getting yanked from you or the ITC getting changed or yanked, which is both of which many of American installers today are sitting under. So in most of the world, you don't have net metering or an ITC, right? Here in the UK, you don't have permitting. You can install at $1.50 a watt, and you can invest in your business and grow it, knowing that the government can't pull the subsidy or pull net metering.
Yeah.
So it's that we need it so that we can actually invest and grow and kind of control our own destiny.
Yeah, no, we're fighting so hard for that, but we're fighting also not only the federal government doesn't really care, or in some ways is opposed, but we're also fighting the utilities who are insidious in figuring out ways to improve their business of selling expensive electricity and suppressing people from putting solar on the roof. And that's a big fight that we've got at CalSA here in California coming up. They're trying to remove grandfathering, trying to put in fixed charges, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Fascinating about OpenSolar and SolarAPP and what's happening now, but what do you have coming next from those products?
So SolarAPP is all about getting it across all the cities as fast as possible so it can benefit everyone. They're also adding other features so we can add different types of solar installations, different electrification products. Because you've got this massive theme of, in this new multi-directional grid and smart energy consumer base, we are going to have more integration of solar with storage, with heat pumps and EV chargers. So we need to have an automated permitting solution for all of the above. And on that theme, I'd say next at OpenSolar, directionally for us, is making sure that our technology can support all of those electrification solutions. So, the ability, I think your business is doing, to start selling, designing heat pumps with an EV charger, a battery, and a solar system. So you can give that whole customer view in one tool, I think is going to be really important to the success over the next 10 years. So OpenSolar is going to be launching that along with a lot more automation in design and AI tools that basically, again, take work off the plate of the contractor, so that they can make more money, sell more systems, and frankly, enjoy it more. Because, not every day is perfect in solar. It can be tough. So taking what we can off their plate allows these kind of solar heroes to grow as best they can.
It's interesting that you mentioned heat pumps and other electrification. That's the way that our business has been growing over the last few years, where we're complete electrification contractors, which basically means starting off with generation and storage. But the solutions that you've developed for solar and storage are definitely needed for HVAC. And now we've got, turning into repeating the same things we did in the solar industry, doing HVAC sales, design, permitting, inspections. And so there's a complete overlap with that. The difference, and the reason why the HVAC business hasn't really been hindered by this, is people need heat pumps and air conditioners and furnaces for their comfort. And they're not looking at the economics. It's just I just need heat. I need air conditioning. Whereas the justification for solar, especially the solar that's sold through leases and third-party ownership, is it's a good financial investment. So the lower the costs and that we can set up for solar and storage, the better the finances look. And there's no real comfort benefit from putting solar panels on your roof. But still, integrating them together with electrification, I'd love to work with you on ways to do that. So I'm very enthusiastic about that.
Yeah, great to hear. I think there is a package, there's a story that, powering your life with sunshine, getting in the car and knowing that was powered for free by solar panels on your roof. And, called Danny Kennedy, our friend, longtime solar veteran, always has this wonderful line, cold beers, warm showers, powered by the sun, right? There's a comfort feel to it. There's a feel good factor that I think, in addition to the money savings, is just very cool and very powerful.
I mean, I'm ecstatic every time I look at my true up bill at the end of the year. We get a check from the city of San Jose. Yeah, $100, $200, but it's just like we size the system right, and we get it, and it's great. I got to pay a little bit for natural gas just for the hot tub, but that's it. But it's that feeling of doing the right thing, and I think we need more of that in the U.S. rather than less, which is the kind of the trend that we're going on. But let's back up a little bit. How did you get into this crazy solar industry decades ago?
So I was always into the environment. I was Captain Planet, back when I was a kid as a nickname. And I started off doing socially responsible investment as kind of a banker. I met while I was raising capital for a small business, Astropower, back in Delaware in the 90s.
Oh, I remember Astropower. Yep, with Howard
Yeah.
Wenger. Yep.
Howard Wenger, yeah, what a hero. I still know Howard well. He's a great guy. Peter, I thought was anyway, so we've got, that opened my eyes to the cost trend in solar. And I'm like, this is going to change the world. So I quit my job. I went and did a postgraduate degree in the University of New South Wales in photovoltaics back when the global market was, I think, 80 megawatts.
Was Dr. Shi there at the time?
Yeah, Dr. Shi and Professor Martin Green and Stuart Wenham and all the sort of like the people that most people in the world have not heard of. But I think when we write books about how we solved climate, like these are the people that I actually think are going to be the true heroes of our industry. So anyway, did BP Solar for a while, got the Australian market off the ground with a bunch of policy work we did really early on. And then came to the States and started Sungevity when I kind of saw that need for automation and digital tools. So that was kind of my journey.
Yeah. And the journey continues. We're the solar warriors. We're not going to stop ever. And, even the older solar pioneers, they're still out there plugging away. So how can people get in touch with you?
So there's a website now, ebirchy.com. That's got all the content and social and policy stuff that I'm throwing out. LinkedIn is great too. And if you just contact OpenSolar, we are desperate to help you and help you as a business thrive and help customers go solar. So yeah, we're passionate. And just to finish where we started, like the next 10 years, it's been great till now with 34% compound growth, but we've only got to 5% penetration. Like this is the piece where we go from 5 to 50. So let the fun begin.
And looking forward to the continued fight because it's the right thing to do and got the winds of economics at our back. All right, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Thanks for Birchy for joining me on this week's show. And thanks for all of our listeners for tuning in. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at www.energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.